To understand why the United States has historically backed Pakistan, we must travel back in time to the frosty era of the Cold War. In the years following World War II, the world was sharply divided into two major camps. On one side stood the United States and its Western allies, championing democracy and capitalism. On the other was the Soviet Union, spreading its communist ideology across the globe. For American policymakers, the primary goal was containment, stopping the spread of Soviet influence at all costs. Every country was seen through this lens, and alliances were formed not just on shared values, but on strategic necessity. India, under its first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, chose a different path. It championed the non-aligned movement, refusing to formally side with either the United States or the Soviet Union. This independent stance was viewed with suspicion in Washington. American leaders wanted clear allies, nations that would stand firmly with them against the communist threat. India's neutral position and its occasional leanings towards socialist policies made it an unreliable partner in their eyes. This created a strategic opening, a vacuum that another nation in the region could fill, and that nation turned out to be Pakistan. Pakistan, in contrast, was eager to align itself with the West. Its leaders saw a partnership with the United States as a way to gain security, military aid, and international standing, particularly in its rivalry with its much larger neighbor, India. In the 1950s, Pakistan eagerly joined US-led alliances designed to encircle the Soviet Union, such as the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization and the Central Treaty Organization. For the US, this was a perfect match. Pakistan offered a strategic location bordering Iran and close to the Soviet Union, making it an invaluable post for intelligence gathering and a potential staging ground for military operations. This alliance was cemented with generous military and economic aid. The United States provided Pakistan with advanced weaponry, including tanks and fighter jets, and helped modernize its armed forces. This support was officially intended to bolster Pakistan against potential Soviet aggression, but Pakistani leaders always had another adversary in mind: India. The US knew this, but the larger strategic game of the Cold War took precedence. The partnership was a marriage of convenience, where each side got something it desperately needed. For the US, it was a loyal ally against communism. For Pakistan, it was a powerful patron in its regional power struggle. The carefully constructed US-Pakistan alliance faced its first major test during the India-Pakistan War of 1965. The conflict was a direct result of the unresolved dispute over the territory of Kashmir, a flashpoint that had simmered since the partition of British India in 1947. Pakistan, feeling confident with its recently upgraded military hardware from the United States, initiated Operation Gibraltar, an attempt to foment an insurgency in Indian-administered Kashmir. This quickly escalated into a full-scale war, with both armies clashing along their international border. It was a moment of truth for the American foreign policy establishment. The United States found itself in an incredibly awkward position. It had armed Pakistan for the stated purpose of defending against communism, but now those very weapons were being used against India, a fellow democracy that Washington was also trying to court. The situation was a diplomatic nightmare. The US government had assured India for years that its military aid to Pakistan would not be used offensively against them. The outbreak of war proved those assurances hollow. America's credibility was on the line, and it was forced to act in a way that pleased neither of its South Asian acquaintances. In response to the escalating conflict, the Johnson administration made a drastic decision. It imposed a complete arms embargo on both India and Pakistan. On the surface, this seemed like a fair and neutral action, a way to avoid taking sides and to pressure both nations to stop fighting. However, the impact of the embargo was far from equal. India, which had diversified its military suppliers over the years, relied heavily on the Soviet Union and Britain for its weaponry. While the American embargo was an inconvenience, it was not catastrophic. India's war machine could continue to function with support from its other partners. For Pakistan, the American arms embargo was a devastating blow. Its military was almost entirely dependent on US equipment, from its Patton tanks to its F-86 Sabre jets. Without a steady supply of spare parts, ammunition, and replacement hardware, its ability to sustain a prolonged conflict was severely crippled. The war ended in a stalemate after a few weeks, with both sides exhausted, but the diplomatic fallout was significant. In Pakistan, there was a deep sense of betrayal. They felt that their most powerful ally had abandoned them in their hour of need. This event created a lasting wound in the US-Pakistan relationship, planting seeds of mistrust that would linger for decades. Just when the US-Pakistan relationship seemed to have cooled permanently, a major geopolitical event pulled them back together with renewed intensity. In December 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, a move that sent shockwaves through Washington. From the American perspective, this was a bold and aggressive expansion of Soviet influence, bringing Moscow's forces dangerously close to the vital oil routes of the Persian Gulf. President Jimmy Carter called it the most serious threat to peace since the Second World War. The United States needed a way to counter the Soviets, and once again, Pakistan's geography made it the indispensable partner. Pakistan, now under the military rule of General Zia-ul-Haq, shared a long and porous border with Afghanistan. This made it the perfect conduit for a covert war against the Soviet occupation. The US strategy was to arm and fund the Afghan resistance fighters, known as the Mujahideen, to bleed the Soviet army dry. Pakistan would serve as the frontline state, the base of operations where weapons could be delivered, fighters could be trained, and strategy could be coordinated. General Zia saw this as a golden opportunity to restore his country's strategic importance and secure a massive influx of American aid. A new, deeper partnership was quickly forged. The United States, working closely with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, launched one of the largest covert operations in its history. Billions of dollars in cash and advanced weaponry flowed into Pakistan. This aid was used to support the Afghan Mujahideen, but it also significantly strengthened the Pakistani military and propped up General Zia's regime. The previous American concerns about Pakistan's human rights record and its burgeoning nuclear program were quietly set aside. The immediate priority was to defeat the Soviets in Afghanistan, and Pakistan was the key to achieving that goal. This decade-long collaboration was immensely successful from a strategic standpoint. The relentless guerrilla war waged by the Mujahideen, armed with US-supplied weapons like the Stinger anti-aircraft missile, turned Afghanistan into the Soviet Union's own Vietnam. The Red Army eventually withdrew in defeat in 1989, a humiliation that contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union itself. However, this victory came at a high price. The massive infusion of weapons and the promotion of a radical Islamist ideology to fight the Soviets had long-term consequences, destabilizing the region and helping to create the very militant groups that would later haunt both Pakistan and the United States. The end of the Soviet-Afghan War in 1989 brought an abrupt change to the US-Pakistan relationship. With the common enemy gone, the strategic glue that held the alliance together dissolved. Suddenly, other issues that had been ignored during the 1980s came back to the forefront, chief among them being Pakistan's clandestine nuclear weapons program. The United States had long suspected that Pakistan was developing a nuclear bomb, and American law, specifically the Pressler Amendment, required the president to certify annually that Pakistan did not possess a nuclear device in order to continue providing aid. Throughout the 1980s, Presidents Reagan and Bush had provided this certification, even when intelligence suggested otherwise, because Pakistan's cooperation in Afghanistan was deemed too important. But in 1990, with the Soviets gone, President George H.W. Bush could no longer credibly make that claim. Aid and military sales to Pakistan were abruptly cut off. This sudden shift was seen in Islamabad as yet another American betrayal. From their perspective, the US had used them for its own strategic ends, and then discarded them once the job was done. The relationship entered a deep freeze throughout most of the 1990s. The situation became even more complicated in May 1998. India, under a new nationalist government, conducted a series of 5 nuclear tests, declaring itself a nuclear-armed state. This action put immense pressure on Pakistan to demonstrate its own capabilities. Despite intense international pressure, including a phone call from President Bill Clinton urging restraint, Pakistan responded with its own series of nuclear tests just a few weeks later. The nuclear genie was now officially out of the bottle in South Asia, a region rife with tension and unresolved conflicts. The world watched in alarm as the subcontinent suddenly became the most dangerous place on Earth. The United States responded swiftly by imposing broad sanctions on both India and Pakistan under the Glenn Amendment. These sanctions were designed to punish both countries for their nuclear proliferation and to deter others from following suit. However, the long-term effect was to push the US to engage more directly with both nations to manage the new nuclear reality. The sanctions era was difficult, but it also marked the beginning of a slow shift in American thinking. Policymakers began to see India not just as a nuclear problem, but as a large, rising democracy and a potential strategic partner. The nuclear tests, paradoxically, forced the US to take India more seriously on the world stage. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, dramatically and instantly reshaped American foreign policy, and once again placed Pakistan at the center of US strategic interests. The Al-Qaeda terrorists who carried out the attacks were based in Afghanistan, under the protection of the Taliban regime. As the United States prepared to invade Afghanistan to dismantle Al-Qaeda and topple the Taliban, it needed logistical support, overflight rights, and intelligence cooperation. Just as in the Soviet era, Pakistan's geography made it absolutely essential. It shared a long border with Afghanistan and had deep historical ties to the Taliban. In the days following 9/11, the Bush administration delivered a stark ultimatum to Pakistan's leader, General Pervez Musharraf. "You are either with us, or you are with the terrorists." Musharraf, recognizing the gravity of the situation, quickly pledged his country's full support to the US war on terror. Overnight, Pakistan transformed from a sanctioned, isolated state into a crucial frontline ally. The sanctions that had been in place since the 1998 nuclear tests were waived, and a flood of American military and economic aid began to pour into the country once more. It was, honestly, a stunning reversal of fortunes. In 2004, the United States formalized this renewed partnership by designating Pakistan a major non-NATO ally, or MNNA. This special status granted Pakistan privileged access to American military equipment, training programs, and defense cooperation. It was a sign of Pakistan's critical role in supporting US operations in Afghanistan. For nearly 2 decades, Pakistan provided vital supply lines for NATO forces, shared intelligence, and conducted counter-terrorism operations on its side of the border. The US-Pakistan relationship, it seemed, was back on solid ground, driven by the urgent and shared threat of terrorism. However, this partnership was fraught with deep-seated mistrust and conflicting objectives. While Pakistan cooperated with the US in hunting down Al-Qaeda members, elements within its security establishment were accused of providing support and sanctuary to the Afghan Taliban. American officials grew increasingly frustrated with what they saw as Pakistan's double game. They believed Pakistan was playing both sides, accepting billions in US aid while hedging its bets on the eventual outcome in Afghanistan. This created a dysfunctional and often toxic dynamic where public statements of alliance masked private recriminations and suspicion on both sides. While the United States was entangled in its complicated and often frustrating alliance with Pakistan during the war on terror, another profound shift was quietly taking place. American policymakers began to look at the global landscape and see the rise of a new power that aligned far more closely with long-term United States interests: India. This wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual evolution, driven by a convergence of economic, democratic, and strategic factors. India was emerging as a major economic powerhouse, with a rapidly growing middle class and a vibrant tech sector. The turning point in United States-India relations was the landmark United States-India Civil Nuclear Agreement, finalized back in 2008. This deal effectively ended India's nuclear isolation, allowing it to access international civilian nuclear technology and fuel, even though it was not a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The agreement was a huge strategic bet by the United States. It signaled that the United States was willing to bend the global non-proliferation rules for India, recognizing it as a responsible actor and a vital future partner. This act opened the floodgates for a much deeper and broader relationship across all sectors. As the 21st century progressed, the primary strategic challenge for the United States shifted from counterterrorism to great power competition, specifically the rise of an increasingly assertive China. In this new context, India's values skyrocketed. As the world's most populous democracy, situated strategically in the Indo-Pacific, India became the natural counterweight to China's growing influence. The United States began to view India as the cornerstone of its Indo-Pacific strategy. This shared concern about China provided a powerful and enduring foundation for a new strategic partnership, one based on common interests rather than temporary needs. This burgeoning relationship was formalized through a series of key defense and security agreements. The United States designated India as a major defense partner, a status unique to India, which facilitates the sale of high-end American military technology. The two countries deepened their cooperation through the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, alongside Japan and Australia, and signed foundational defense pacts like LMOA, COMCASA, and BECA. These agreements allow for greater interoperability between their militaries, enabling them to work together more seamlessly. The focus of American strategy in South Asia was clearly and decisively shifting from Pakistan to India. The dramatic realignment of United States priorities in South Asia is clearly reflected in the patterns of weapons sales and military aid over the last 2 decades. For years, Pakistan was a major recipient of advanced American military hardware. The F-16 fighter jet became the symbol of the United States-Pakistan security relationship, a powerful tool provided to a key ally during the Cold War and the War on Terror. However, as the relationship became strained by mistrust over Afghanistan and Pakistan's drift towards China, the flow of United States arms slowed to a trickle. American aid was cut and major weapons deals were put on hold. In stark contrast, United States arms sales to India have surged. As the strategic partnership deepened, the United States became one of India's top defense suppliers. India has purchased billions of dollars worth of advanced American military equipment, including C-17 and C-130J transport aircraft, P-8I maritime patrol planes, Apache and Chinook helicopters, and M777 howitzers. This shift is not just about money. It represents a fundamental change in trust and strategic alignment. Selling sensitive military technology is a sign of a deep partnership, and the United States is now placing that trust in New Delhi, not Islamabad. Meanwhile, Pakistan has turned elsewhere to meet its military needs, primarily to its all-weather friend, China. Today, over 70% of Pakistan's arms imports come from Beijing. China has become Pakistan's main supplier of everything from fighter jets and naval frigates to tanks and submarines. This growing military dependence has pulled Pakistan ever deeper into China's strategic orbit, further diminishing its value as a partner for the United States. The rationale for providing Pakistan with United States military technology has evaporated as its own military becomes increasingly integrated with that of America's main global rival. This changing flow of arms has real-world consequences for regional power dynamics. India's military is modernizing with cutting-edge technology from the United States, Israel, and France, enhancing its conventional superiority in the region. Pakistan, while still a formidable military power with a nuclear arsenal, finds itself more reliant on a single patron and facing economic crises that limit its ability to fund its defense. The United States is no longer trying to maintain a delicate military balance between the two rivals. Instead, It is actively helping to build up India's capabilities as part of a broader strategy to ensure stability and a favorable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. As of today, in mid-2025, the strategic landscape has become clearer than ever before. The original reasons for America's deep alliance with Pakistan are now relics of history. The Cold War is over, the Soviet Union is gone, and American troops have withdrawn from Afghanistan. The very foundation of the United States-Pakistan partnership has crumbled. Continuing to grant Pakistan special privileges, like its major non-NATO ally status, is a policy stuck in the past. It no longer reflects America's current interests or the geopolitical realities of the 21st century. It is time for a fundamental update. India, on the other hand, represents the future. It is the world's largest democracy, a society with shared values, and a commitment to a rules-based international order. Its economy is one of the fastest growing in the world, presenting enormous opportunities for trade and investment. Most importantly, India is a critical partner in the defining challenge of our time, managing the rise of China. A strong, prosperous, and democratic India is one of the best guarantees for a free and open Indo-Pacific. The alignment of interests between Washington and New Delhi is natural, broad, and built to last. Keeping the old alliance structure with Pakistan in place actively undermines American credibility. How can the United States build a deep, trusting partnership with India while simultaneously maintaining a special status for Pakistan, a country that is increasingly aligned with China and has a long history of supporting militant groups? This contradictory policy sends mixed signals to both allies and adversaries. It suggests a lack of strategic clarity and resolve. Formally upgrading the relationship with India while recalibrating the one with Pakistan would demonstrate that the United States aligns its partnerships with its contemporary interests and values. This does not mean the United States should completely abandon Pakistan. It remains a nuclear-armed country of over 230 million people in a volatile region. Engagement is still necessary, particularly on issues of counterterrorism, nuclear security, and regional stability. However, the nature of the relationship must change. It should be a pragmatic, transactional relationship based on specific shared interests, not a privileged alliance. The special status and extensive aid of the past should be replaced by a more realistic approach. The future of American strategy in Asia lies in a robust, comprehensive partnership with India. In conclusion, the long and complicated history of United States relationships in South Asia has been a story of shifting priorities. The alliance with Pakistan was born out of the Cold War's strategic imperatives, a necessary partnership to counter the Soviet Union. It was revived by the geography of the war in Afghanistan, but these reasons are now obsolete. The relationship was always a marriage of convenience, marked by periods of deep cooperation, followed by sharp feelings of betrayal and mistrust. Today, Pakistan's growing dependence on China and its continued struggles with economic instability and militancy make it a far less reliable or useful partner for the United States. Conversely, the rise of India presents the United States with an unparalleled opportunity. The United States-India partnership is built on a much stronger foundation of shared democratic values, converging economic interests, and a mutual concern about maintaining a stable, rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. India is not just an alternative to Pakistan, it is a major global power in its own right and the most natural long-term strategic ally for the United States in the region. The steady growth of this relationship over the past 2 decades, through defense deals, diplomatic cooperation, and economic ties, shows its immense potential. The path forward for the United States requires strategic clarity and bold action. The first step should be to conditionally revoke Pakistan's major non-NATO ally status. This move would send a clear signal that the privileges of a close alliance must be earned and must align with current American interests. This status could be restored in the future if Pakistan meets clear benchmarks on critical issues like counterterrorism and economic reform. This approach would right-size the relationship to reflect today's reality without severing ties completely, allowing for continued engagement through diplomatic and economic channels like the IMF. Ultimately, American foreign policy must adapt to a changing world. A strategy that clings to the alliances of the past is doomed to fail. By formally embracing India as its primary strategic partner in the region, the United States would not only be acknowledging the current geopolitical reality, but would also be investing in a more stable and prosperous future for Asia.